This is Tim, and in this video, I'm going to go over this article, Paying for News, What Google and Meta Owe U.S. Publishers, and why it's fatally wrong. It's amateurishly wrong. Despite having 4 doctors author this, they got a lot of fundamentals wrong, which I'm very surprised at. I'm going to go over 4 problems with their paper. I could go over a dozen, but in the interest of time, I'm going to take the 4 easiest ones. The first one is they're very misleading about how Facebook display works. Second, they have fuzzy math that doesn't add up. Third, they use a bad 50-50 ratio on an assumption. And fourth, they miss the other half of the value equation. Now, I'm going to go over these one by one. So in their paper, they're talking about Facebook display. Now, don't squint. You don't need to read this, but I'll read the highlighted portion. The user may enjoy some benefit from consuming only the headline, then opting to continue scrolling on Facebook without leaving the platform. In another case, Facebook benefits from the news publisher's content without the publisher being compensated for that content. Okay, so what do they mean? Here's an example that they provide in the paper. So these are news items from a newspaper which shows up in someone's feed. And even though a person may not scroll through it or click on it, just because it's here, that means it can gain interest. The user is more likely to stick around and interact with Facebook and later on click on ads, even if they're not clicking to the newspaper itself. And that by itself has value. So I'm going to go over an example of this. So this is from my local newspaper, the Everett Herald. And you can see this is an article which showed up in my feed. You see the photo, the headline, and the first sentence. And then you see to the right of that are some ads. Now, because I see this article in my feed, that means I'm more likely to be drawn to it. And I'm also likely to see the ads. I'm more likely to click on the ads. So this article from the Everett Herald, even though I'm not clicking on it, it still has value to Facebook because it's shown along with ads that I'm likely to click upon. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but it does have some logic and flow to it. Now, what they don't say in the paper is that this, what I'm seeing in my feed from the Everett Herald, Facebook did not script it from its website. Rather, they got it from the Everett Herald's own Facebook profile. So that is someone at the Everett Herald. They went ahead and they deliberately put this news story into their Facebook profile. And from there, it was shared to me. So Facebook didn't cull this from the newspaper's website without permission. The Everett Herald took time and effort and energy to go ahead and put this in their feed, all right, which was then shared with other users. So this is no different than when you see something that your friend posted in their feed and it pops up in yours. All right, it's the same thing here. So the critical question is, if the Herald thinks, or any other newspaper think that they should be compensated for it, then why are they putting it in the feed in the first place? I mean, if I think I should do something to get compensated for it, but I'm not, then I don't do it. It's that simple. All right. And they totally miss this, that no one is forcing the Everett Herald or any other newspaper to put these items in their feed, which are going to be shared with other people. It's a very obvious question, and the authors of the study totally miss it. Okay, but there's even a second point I want to go over with this. Now, another local newspaper for me is the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Times had this in their feed. News story with a photo, the headline, and the first couple of sentences. And of course, they say that since you're presenting this information, the authors of the study say you're presenting this information, this still has value to the user. But what they don't say is the same information is also available in a lot of other places, and so the value of this information is diluted. So as one example, when I go to the Seattle Times website, I can see the exact same headline on their website. Now, of course, it's not everything that's present on Facebook, but there is some information there. And so that means what I'm seeing on the Facebook feed, it doesn't quite have the same value. All right, but more than that, I could go to the AP website and read the full article over there. I can get all the information from the same article. So let's go back up to here. When Facebook is presenting this information in my feed and saying that this information has value to me, well, it does, but the Seattle Times is not the only purveyors of this information. It's presented in a lot of other places. And because it's presented in a lot of other places, it gets diluted, the value of it. All right? Seattle Times isn't unique in this. And so that dilution of value, in no place is that ever calculated within their calculations on the paper. They seem to act like each newspaper is unique and the only one publishing their particular news item, and that's not true. Okay, let's go on to number 2. So they come up with a value of $1.9 billion. And this is the meat of it. This is how they come to it. But the problem is that they describe it in narrative form. So I extracted the critical points. This is what they said. So Meta made 114 billion worldwide and 54 billion in North America. Facebook users are 68 to 79% of Meta. Within that, Facebook is 59 to 60% of the Meta. The USA portion is 94% of Facebook North America. And 13.2% of users interact with news content, though Facebook says it's 4%. From this, they get the value of that news is worth $3.8 billion. Okay, the problem is they never describe how they calculate to get this $3.8 billion. That is, given these 5 variables, I put them together in different combinations, and I can never come up with $3.8 billion. I don't know what the hell they're multiplying to come up with this number. And as an undergraduate, one of the rules you're taught is show your proof or show your work. And this is elementary. And the fact that they don't show their particular calculations to come up with this $3.8 billion, I think is particularly amateurish on their part. Right? Instead of putting it into narrative form, you have to put it into equation and show how you're exactly getting it so others can prove it. And they don't do that. So I think that's particularly sloppy on their part. Also, I alluded to this in a bit in the previous. So they say that since that value is $3.8 billion, that the news publishers deserve half of that. Okay, and how they're getting this is we follow the industry norm of a 50-50 split between the platform and news publishers for advertising revenue. Okay, so this is, I guess they're saying no more than a tradition. And like any tradition, it's rather fluid and changes over time. Okay, but yet they're sticking it as a golden rule. Now, a weakness about this, that 50-50 split is used between the publisher and the advertiser when the full article is used. So again, I'm using this same first article I referenced. Now take a look at the right hand side. This is the full article. It has the headline, the image, and about 7 paragraphs worth of text. If another advertiser were to share this full thing, then they would be splitting that revenue, 50% that they get from their ads, with the original publisher. But take a look at Facebook. They're not using the whole article. They're publishing the photo, the headline, and the first to 3 sentences from the article. So they're using 5 to 10% of that article. So why would you split your revenue 50-50 when you're only using such a small portion of the article and not the whole thing? And this is another obvious question that the authors totally miss. They just take that 50-50 split as if it's gold, and they miss something that's rather out in your face. Let's go on to the fourth part. They miss the other half of the value equation. Now, they acknowledge it. They say, likewise, for news publishers, the platform provides popular, easy-to-use channels through which to distribute news content to a larger audience. But nowhere is this calculated. So they're saying that when Facebook publishes that news item from that newspaper's feed in your own feed, that has value to Facebook. Fair enough. But they acknowledge that getting that article in front of a set of eyeballs has value, but nowhere do they calculate the value of that. So this is bilateral. Facebook gets value from republishing that news content, and the news publisher gets value from getting exposure to the news content. But this whole paper, it only covers one half of the equation. Nowhere did they cover the other half. Okay? So the newspapers, if the newspaper wants value for the news article put in front of the user, all right, Facebook should be able to get value from that newspaper for putting the news content in front of a set of eyeballs. So it works both ways, but this whole newspaper only takes it one way. So I think this is what's really going on here. All right. So the authors, they came to a predestined conclusion by a bunch of silent assumptions, which they never told you about. I can take a look at this and craft a different set of facts and come up with a totally different set of calculation on how the newspapers owe Facebook money. And I could back it up with the values, on the right set of assumptions. Well, what the authors did is they took their own set of assumptions to come up with a calculation how those newspapers are owed money. Now, the reality is Facebook is a more effective advertising mechanism than newspapers. I've been in marketing, and I've done more with $7,000 in Facebook ads than I've done with $12,000 in newspaper spend. And that's because Facebook, it's a lot more of a demographically rich advertising mechanism. Newspapers, of course, are a broadcast mechanism. When I'm on Facebook, I can say I only want to advertise to women between this age group who are interested in luxury travel. Facebook is much more trackable and for advertisers, and also I can see how they interact. I can follow them through once when they come to my website. I can't do that with newspapers. Now, so kind of the problem with newspapers is they have a product, but they don't have the business case. And not to work on newspapers, we also know that newspapers, they're critically important to a healthy democracy. They do a wonderful service, which we need. We know how to keep an eye on politicians, corrupt businesses, and everything else. And we need an ecosystem for newspapers to thrive. So what really happens is Facebook becomes the honeypot for newspapers. Newspapers are struggling. They need money. Their advertising really doesn't work because Facebook kills that advertising. And so these newspapers say, hey, geez, Facebook is using some of our content. Let's get some of that money from Facebook. And that's what's really going on here. And so the authors, they're full of crap. Okay? They put out a very weak paper that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. They have a bunch of silent assumptions, and this is not their finest literature. Anyway, I thank you for listening to this. I hope you got value, and if you have comments, please leave them below.